Our body is constantly regulating the oxygen and carbon dioxide in our bodies, and it's finding the perfect pH so that we feel balanced and so that our body's chemistry can support all of the systems, right? The pH of our body is really important beyond just the breath. It has to do with our digestion, our mental clarity, even the function of our muscles. And so we actually don't cue like inhale, reach the arms overhead, exhale, hinge forward at the hips anymore, because it encourages that pattern of breathing the way we want to breathe, you know, breathing with the mind, rather than just like letting our incredibly amazing bodies do the thing that they were made to do. Right? Thumbs up if this makes sense so far, and then we'll talk about how we're gonna do it. So you may have noticed from coming to yoga classes with me now for a few weeks or more that in the beginning I lead a little breath awareness, you know, and it's not like inhale, do this, exhale, do this, but it's just like observe the breath, you know, notice, maybe slow it down a little bit, not in a forceful way, but just so that you can really feel it. The way you guys learned that slowing down your movements also helps. And I'm sorry that it's still this journal slide. I'll show you what my slide is for this, and you'll understand very quickly why I didn't want to put it on the screen. Oh, that's not it. This is my slide. It's coming up, but it's better than the journal slide. So now we're going to talk about the breath. So we start by just observing the breath, not changing it, just letting it be, and being okay with the state of our breath and trusting our body to regulate that. And then as we move, instead of trying to be like, okay, only when I inhale can I lift and open and expand. Only when I exhale can I fold and close and contract. It's just like let the breath keep happening and let the body keep moving, and the two will be smooth, right? And they'll happen naturally. And it's like when I'm in a pose, I'm inhaling and exhaling. You know, I don't have to rush the movement. I don't have to rush the breath. It's just like being okay with these two things happening simultaneously. And it's actually really exciting because if you're in a pose, if you're always only inhaling here and exhaling here, it actually will change what muscles are firing versus I'm here and I'm smoothly inhaling and exhaling, and then I'm moving and I'm inhaling and exhaling. It starts to be a more full-bodied experience. So the good news is there is not anything tricky that you have to do with the breath. You really don't. And I will put a text box on here just for like a couple of takeaways. Get people to notice their breath, right? So it's noticing, it's encouraging natural breath, it's reminding people to breathe. Do you guys remember the other day when I think I told Mel to like slow down, and she was like, oh, now I'm breathing again. So remind people to breathe. And I think this approach should actually be more fun for you as a teacher, because it actually used to have to be sort of a lot to be like, okay, every movement, it's like, all right, everyone, inhale, sweep the arms overhead, exhale, hinge forward at the hips, inhale, lengthen the spine, exhale, release, inhale, repeat. Like it really was a lot in an exhausting kind of way. And now you can be like this support system, right? Where it's like, oh, notice your breath. Keep your breath smooth. Continue to breathe as you lengthen the spine, you know? Make sure the breath feels natural, whatever. And it's not every second, right? You might cue it at the beginning and then just have some reminders along the way. Maybe it's when you are like, oh, I have to take a breath. Then you tell your students to observe their breath. So I hope that it's actually easy and effortless for you, as the breath should be, right? It should just be easy and effortless. Our body is smarter than we are. It knows how to breathe, and it will breathe better if we stop trying to say like, oh, I'm gonna take the biggest inhale ever as I do this certain thing. It will start to be more empowered, just like our body's becoming more empowered to tell us when it feels stable, when it feels safe, when it feels supported, when things feel good. Any questions or comments? Okay. I'm really excited that this, and it's not an accident, but we're talking about this right before back bends, because I think in back bends, there really is a tendency to hold the breath, right? Or there's a tendency to not take very deep breaths. So I think it'll be my homework for you guys, or like for myself, to constantly be helping remind you to breathe and letting the breath be natural as we do these back bends. And then just try to like almost allow yourself to absorb those cues, right? So that when you start to bring in some breathing cues, you have experience with like, oh, this is what it felt like when she said this, right? And this seemed like a good time to cue the breath or whatever. So today, as we learn about back bends, the extra ball that you're going to be juggling is to be paying more attention to your breath and more attention to breath cues. And we'll just see how it goes. Any questions? Are you excited to experience your natural breath? Yeah. So I am excited to dive into back bends, but I feel like we should experience our natural breaths first. So take a moment to make sure you're sitting comfortably. And close the eyes. And try to notice the sensation of your breath. And as soon as you bring awareness to it, it might start to change. And that's okay. You can let it change. Sometimes we have a dysfunctional habit that's really common and normal. And just by bringing awareness to the breath, the body starts to regulate. And so allow the breath to change if it needs to. And notice the sensation of the inhale and see if you can remain just a little more relaxed. Like instead of taking the inhale, taking the breath, just imagine your body just receiving the inhale, just slowly and naturally filling up. And you don't have to do anything. You just have to be open to the reception. As you observe the inhale, notice any sense of the breath filling you without it being overwhelming, without feeling like you have to expand a tremendous amount or even hold the breath. Just let it gently seep in as if you were a very dry desert and the breath is like rain. And the inhale just soaks into you and soaks deeper and deeper. And then trust that the inhale will continue naturally on its own as you shift the emphasis to your exhale. Just noticing the quality of the exhale, the sensation. And see if you can relax as you exhale. Sometimes the exhale can feel a little uncomfortable for type A sort of people. Like it can feel like letting go of control is scary. So just see if you can allow yourself to soften and just trust the wisdom of the breath. Pay a little extra attention to the end of the exhale and that really slight pause afterwards before you inhale. Just letting yourself be empty and relaxed before the process happens again. And then see if you can just observe the full breath cycle of the inhale and the exhale without changing anything. Just feeling that gentle rise and gentle fall. Let it almost be like your heartbeat, right? Just this pulsation that's happening so perfectly without control. And let's experiment with just a little bit of really gentle movement without losing our connection to the breath. So see if you can continue to observe just that natural and smooth inhale, exhale pattern as you gently start to lift the arms up and resist that temptation to take that doership inhale, right? And just allow yourself to breathe as the arms lift. Allow your natural breath to continue as the arms lower. And just do this a few times, allowing the breath to do whatever it wants as you smoothly lift and lower the arms, feeling every moment of your movement. The next time the arms lift, lengthen the spine and try to feel the front and the back of the heart lifting and expanding. And then just gently continue to breathe as you sway up and over to one side And then up and over to the other side. And just try to be aware of the inner sensation of the breath and then the inner sensation of the movement. And then bring the hands to a T. And just because we're going to be working with back bends, let's try letting the heart lift as you gently press the arms back. And again, allow the breath to be natural as you're in this baby back bend. Imagine the breath filling not just the front of the body, not just the heart in the front, but the back of the body. And then slowly let the arms float down, allow the spine to come to neutral, and observe the breath for a moment in stillness. And imagine yourself like a raft, an inflatable raft, and each inhale, like the raft just gets a little fuller, you know, more perfect shape, expansive and buoyant. And then each exhale, there's just an even softening, barely perceptible to the eye. So as we do our poses, we're able to experience the body fully expanding, not just the lungs, not just the front of the chest, but really this more full body experience of expansion and softening. And flicker the eyes open, and as you observe the room around you, see if you can still just have a sense of that natural rise and fall of the breath. Okay. How did that go? Any questions or comments? Did you notice anything about your breath? Did it feel different? Kara.
I noticed.
Oh yeah, is there an option on your phone? Oh, let me see. Maybe I can even unmute the phone. Okay, I hit ask to unmute. I don't know if anything. Wait, I can't hear you. Is there, huh. This is super weird. I'm sorry, Caro. I haven't had this problem before. Is there like anything on the phone that gives you options to do something? Huh. Okay.
I could just talk.
The phone was unmuted before when you first called in. Unmuted.
Weird. Okay, I wonder, was it easy to call in, Caro? Maybe I'll like kick you out, and then when you call back, you'll be unmuted. Let's see if that works. Oh, good. I think you did it yourself because I didn't do it. While Caro is figuring that out, were there any other comments or questions about the breath? How did it feel?
I think I was potentially the most relaxed I've ever been doing that. Now, I was sitting on the couch though too, and I'm wondering if like I get in my head too much, even meditating or whatever, just that I've got to have this support. I don't know. But I was sitting up straight. I wasn't just slouching into it. And I really felt like I really felt my breath being normal and not in my head as much. It was very lovely.
Yay. Thanks for sharing, Amy. I feel like what we're experiencing is like the power of meditation. You know, like I really felt like I'm like, oh, I'm meditating right now, you know, like breath awareness. And something that's been so profound for us as we delve into this in our own personal practices is I'm starting to feel like my movement, my yoga is a lot more meditative than it's ever been, where it's not just like, oh, this helps my body, like, so I can sit for meditation, which is part of yoga, but it makes me feel like as I'm moving, I am doing like the breath awareness meditation. So I think I'm really excited that you had that experience because now I feel like you'll have that little like motivation to be like, okay, how can I bring this in off of the couch?
Hi, can you all
Yay!
hear me?
Yes, it's like magic.
Yeah, this time I don't know how I didn't hear this last time, but the auto message was like press *6 to mute and unmute. So for anybody else whoever needs that.
Thank you so much. I'm like really trying hard to like log that. I'm like, I know this will be important
Right.
in the future.
Same. I was like, okay, *6. But yeah, so I missed most of what Amy said, but sounded like a positive feedback. For me, I noticed when we did the back bend that my breath had a hard time going into my back, like you cued, like it kind of got constricted in the shoulder area while I was in the back bend. So that was kind of interesting. And I've always noticed actually when I do back bends, like I hold my breath. So it's just something I think I have to work on is like finding that flow of the breath while I'm in that kind of posture.
I'm trying to feel it while you're talking because you're wondering what I'm doing. I don't know if I have words for it yet, Caro. I'm excited that we'll get to explore this all day today, you know, back bends and breathing. My instinct is that we hold our breath when we're doing something kind of dysfunctional, and it goes both ways. Like it's like if our breath is dysfunctional, our movement's probably dysfunctional, you know? So it's like it could be the breath causing the movement to be a certain way, and then it can also be the way that we're moving is like forcing us to like almost grip somewhere so we can't breathe naturally. So I think it'll be really exciting as we try to move with more ease where it's no longer like, okay, can I, you know, bring my fingertips to my heel in camel pose or whatever those landmarks are, but really just like, okay, I'm just breathing and I'm lengthening and I'm opening. And it might take time, but I think for you, which has been your homework in a lot of poses, to almost like let go of any goal besides the goal to be like tuned into the breath and let the movement feel really natural. And the exciting thing is, I think it might take some time, but once that happens, your movement will become so much more functional. So it's not like, oh, to have the breath support us, like my back bends are going to look like this. No, it's like as the two start to like fuse and you can breathe more naturally, you know, and not hold the breath and more muscles start to turn on to support you, I think you'll naturally find yourself going deeper in a supportive way. So if, you know, it's almost like, okay, trust the process and let that start to unfold. Today might feel like you're barely doing back bends, but you're able to breathe and feel supported. And I would say, yay, that's such a great success.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like super helpful, and I'm open to just doing as much as I can to have like that full breath.
Yay.
Yeah.
Mel, do you want to add anything? You don't have to, but I want to give you the opportunity before we move on.
Well, I was just gonna say it's true what you say about the when you're told to breathe in or whatever, you're like, or I'm like, it's not like smooth at all. It's just like, okay, she said breathe, let's breathe. And the other thing I was gonna say is back bend sounds scary to me. I don't know. The only experience I've had with yoga is like going to different classes to find one, you know. So I've gone to a lot of classes, a lot of like first time classes, but I don't think I've ever done any back bend. At least I don't remember. I don't know. I'm scared.
I think some of them will be more familiar to you than you know. Don't worry. We're going to make them not scary today. So without any further ado, who recognizes a difference in the back of the lady on the right and the lady on the left? Can you, and if you see it, yeah, Amy, how would you describe the difference?
The one on the right, it's not a smooth movement. Like she's hinging at one spot in her back.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't know this lady. She's just from Google, but I have a feeling she's not breathing very well there, right? Can't, like, just by looking at her, aren't you sort of like kind of what Kara was saying about like, oh, I hold my breath and I feel it in one place in my back. It's like, that's, and Caro, not to say that you would do this pose like this lady, but she's probably not feeling like this whole web of support, right? She's probably just like, meh. And so our experience, our goal is going to be more like this lady on the left, where we are fully supported. There's a buoyancy, you know, an expansion. And sometimes it's really fun to think of it like, oh, I'm just stretching my front, right? Instead of bending back. Makes it sound less scary, right, Mel? Like, oh, let's just stretch our fronts. And so that's what our work will be. And here's the thing. The lady on the right, I know her muscles are not turned on. You can just see it. And so when your muscles aren't turned on, you don't really get a full stretch. The lady on the left, her muscles are definitely turned on. Like they have to be turned on for her to have that level of length and support. And so she's actually getting a deeper stretch, even though it might not look as dramatic of a back bend, because her muscles are actually turned on as they stretch. And we'll talk about that as we go. So let's look at the spine. We looked at the spine day 2. And we saw that the lumbar vertebrae was concave, which means it's always in a slight back bend. Okay, and that's not bad, that's not dysfunctional, that's just the shape of the spine when it forms through us crawling and such. And it's actually quite functional and great that it has that curve. So the top of the spine, the thoracic vertebrae, are curved the other way, right? So it's almost like the thoracic vertebrae are always in a slight forward fold. And so the reason why this is really valuable and important for us to acknowledge, where do you think, actually, when we look at this lady on the left, where do you think it's the easiest to bend from? And it's okay if you don't know, because I'll tell you.
Like, you mean the top? I would say the top, like dropping the top, like the shoulders back.
But where is the curve actually in her back?
Your lumbar.
Yeah, you can see, and it's actually at a place called the thoracolumbar junction, which is where the thoracic spine meets the lumbar spine. The thoracolumbar junction is the most flexible part of our spine, right? And the bottom of the thoracic vertebrae, where our floating ribs are, right? You know those ribs that aren't a part of the rib cage, they're just like little fingers. That's the most flexible part of the spine. And so if we're not aware, if we're not being conscious in our movement, all of the bend is going to happen at that one place. It doesn't feel good. It's not good. It puts a lot of compression on the discs. It's dysfunctional. So our work is going to be to make sure that our lumbar vertebrae are stable, right? That doesn't mean we can't curve from them. They're meant to curve. They actually curve nicely backward. But it means we don't want to just like dump into the low back. It means we really want to make sure we're like lengthening as we reach back from the low back and the upper back. And we actually, it takes a lot of strength to start to open from the upper back. And so it might mean at first you're like, I'm just standing up straight. And that's okay. It's like those muscles are starting to turn on, and then eventually it'll be quite comfortable to come into a deep back bend and have a smooth, even curve where the lumbar is not compressed, and that the thoracic actually starts to like lengthen and curve slightly the other way. Does that make sense? Can you guys visualize that in your body? Okay. So your students don't need to know all that, right? All your students need to know is that we're trying to lengthen the spine and disperse the curve throughout the whole spine. In reality, it's not going to disperse evenly through the whole spine, right? We can see why looking at the spine. It's like some of it's already curved that way, but it just like as a visual that helps people lengthen and use the whole spine instead of just hinging at that one point. Thumbs up if you guys are good. Any questions? Okay. So the muscle group on the top, the erectors or erector spinae, are really the only muscles that we're using to bend back. All of the other muscles in the purple box, the glutes, the adductors, the abs, those are the muscles that we're using to stabilize and support ourselves as the erectors bend us back. So we created this visual to just show you that the glory of a back bend is actually in its stability, right? The majority of the body is going to be like coming alive to stabilize you. So even if you barely bend back, if you feel stable and supported, it's a big deal, right? That's 75% of the pose. Does that make sense? Cool. So we're definitely going to be working for stability, and then down the line, maybe we'll open more and more. So let's look at the muscles that are bending back. These are the erector spinae. Early on, Caro, I feel like you were asking about muscles alongside the spine. And we talked about the erector spinae. So here's a really nice image of them. What is noteworthy is they're actually pretty superficial muscles, right? We've looked at the multifidus, we've looked at the rotators. Those are touching the vertebrae. They're really small and deep. These are on top of those, right? So they're used for bigger movements. Right? Our smaller, deeper muscles are more for like space and stability. So this is the muscle that's really going to help to bend us back. But it needs a lot of help for stabilizing, right? It's not doing the stabilizing. We need all those other muscles to help us stabilize. This is doing like the moving. And so, yay, we are going to explore this muscle in the most perfect erector spinae pose, Bhujangasana, cobra pose. It is going to really help us feel this muscle on the back of the body turning on. And we'll have different explorations, you know, where we move a little bit. And so I'm going to ask you guys to notice, like, look at how big erector spinae is, right? There's like closer to the spine, there's underneath the shoulder, all the way attaching towards the ribs on the right side. So as we sway from side to side, see if you can feel like the different areas of erector spinae supporting you and like how that transfers across your back. So let's say it and then we'll do it. Syllable by syllable, Bhujangasana, Gasana, Jangasana, Bhujangasana, Bhujangasana. Okay. So I am going to first just teach the simplest movement where you're just lifting and lowering, and then we will add on the exploration. But I want you guys to just feel Bhujangasana and the erectors, and then we'll explore. Okay. Sorry, I'm figuring out the best way to show myself. Satyam usually sets this up for me, and I am appreciating him more and more every second. Thank you for your patience as I strive for the level that he makes look so easy. Okay, I think that will do it. So come to the belly, yay! And Mel, I know when we did another pose, this was is that okay? Is that comfortable?
I'm gonna try to do it, but I had a C-section, and it, like yesterday we were doing something with oh my god, I forgot his name, and it was like hurting my stomach a little bit, like the area where
Like,
it was open.
is it like pressure where like actually like the surgery is uncomfortable? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not trying, if it hurts, I'm just not gonna.
Great. Yeah. And that should be the rule all the time. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of experience with C-section, so I don't exactly know. But I wonder maybe if like if you had a blanket or some kind of cushioning just so that there's something softer, not just under the belly, but like under your whole body, that maybe it would help, but I don't know.
Okay, I'll try.
Yeah. So, before we go anywhere, can stack the hands, bring the elbows wide, bring the forehead to the backs of the hands, and just start to observe the breath. And notice that sensation of ever so gently blowing up like a raft evenly through the whole body, and then slightly deflating evenly, just being softer. And we will challenge ourselves to continue observing the breath as we bring the hands just underneath the shoulders. And they can be as wide away from the body as is comfortable. So feel free to take a moment to play with walking them wider, letting the elbows be towards the body and the hands slightly away. And I'm just going to show you what that might look like. So it might look like this underneath your body, just so that you don't feel tight or compressed. And then we'll use the hands to actually start to enliven the muscles on the back. So without moving the hands, just start to drag them in place, right? Like push down into them and isometrically drag them back, and just notice any sensation underneath the shoulders waking up. So Mel, think more about pulling the hands back rather than pushing down, but without moving them. So it's like keep them where they are, but then drag them without moving them. Does that make sense? You feel like how muscles in the body start to turn on? Okay, great. So take a few pulses to drag the hands, allowing the spine to lengthen. Try to bring the elbows towards the body and let the hands just float as wide as they need to be. And then keeping those muscles on, right? Keeping that support, start to let the top of the head reach forward and slightly up. And then release everything back down and drag the hands back. Notice the muscles turning on and reach the head forward and up, letting those muscles start to lift the back of the heart ever so slightly. And try to keep the gaze down so the back of the neck is nice and long. And just take a few pulses, right? Lifting and lowering, letting those muscles turn on, letting those muscles release. Nice job moving slowly, everybody. And then the next time you lift, stay lifted, and then just allow yourself to gently sway from the right to the left. And imagine the support on the back just traveling from the right to the left. And notice those muscles turning on to allow you to lift. Nice. And then release the body down, and for a counter pose, just gently press into the hands and push the hips back to the heels, letting the low back stretch. Observe the breath and imagine the breath just gently filling the low back and softening the low back. And before we go any further, I just want to see if there are any questions. The most important thing, I guess my question for you is, could you feel how dragging the hands allowed you to harness support in the shoulders and back? Did that happen? Okay, great. And now, any questions? Okay. So something I want to demo, and I feel like you can play with this later when you feel more warmed up. If you feel warmed up now, you're welcome to, is this was more like a baby cobra, right? We were just turning those muscles on, not going very high. At a beginning of a class, this is how I would teach it, and then maybe, a little bit later when we're warmer, we could come up a little higher. And so it is okay eventually to first start the way that we did and then put a little more spring in the arms. So my arms are helping me lift, but all of those muscles in my back are still on. I see a lot of people have the muscles in their back off and then just use the arms, and it looks kind of like slouchy and like not great. So that's like here, the muscles in my back are off and I'm just pushing into my arms. To avoid that, we just start with turning the back muscles on and then adding in the arms without releasing the back muscles. And then from there, it's like you can do the same explorations. You know, your movements can get bigger and smaller, but we have a lot of back bends to do, and so you don't have to take it that far just yet. Does that make sense? Do you feel like you could comfortably explore that? Great. So take a moment to take any notes. Some key things here in the setup are a lot of people keep their hands really close and then their elbows sort of fan out because they can't do this. It's actually more functional to keep the elbows in and allow the hands to fan out. So elbows in, or elbows to ribs, as this setup says, and then the hands can come as wide as they need to. Okay, so our next pose is actually pretty similar. Bhujangasana was more for the upper back. Now from the same position, we will be doing the lower back. So you can see how they're similar, but here the legs are lifting instead of the body. And to do this movement, we are going to review our glute muscles. The glutes are amazing. The more I learn about them, the more I just like love and revere them. So let's take a look. This should be review. We looked at the glutes with our hip openers, right? In our standing poses, the hips support the back of the pelvis, so they're what allow us to be stable and shift our weight, and they actually help us open the hips in a really functional way. And it's actually pretty similar in our back bends, but the difference is instead of the legs being wide, now the glutes are helping us open and lengthen the front of our hips, right? If you remember from when we looked at reciprocal inhibition and the muscles working in pairs, same idea here, but now it's just helping us lengthen and open more from the front of the body. Can you see how that is possible? Same muscles doing a similar thing in a different pose. So a reminder, we've got our 3 layers of glutes. Gluteus maximus on the bottom is the biggest and the strongest, and so often he takes over. He just overfires, and the other muscles, glute med and glute min, or gluteus medius, gluteus minimus, they turn off, and that's not good. We want them. We want this whole team of support. So I've got a really funny little rhyme that I made up to help you remember how to engage your glutes. And I'm always glad when it's all girls because I won't do this if there's boys. You want your bum, I guess I can zoom, you can use your imagination. You want your bum like a plum, not like a prune, right? And you know what I'm talking about. When you over squeeze, like your butt turns into a prune, like everything just like, you know, gets like tight and wrinkled. But if there's a little bit of engagement, there's still like a fullness, right? And we have a beautiful picture there for your imagination. So you want the muscles to engage, but you don't want to over squeeze, right? So keep your bum like a plum where you have support, but not like a prune where glute max just turns on and squeezes everything. Does that make sense? Do you guys feel like you know the difference between those feelings in your body and you can try to like work with that? Okay. Yay. I hear a lot of teachers give cues to like turn the glutes off or relax the glutes completely. And I think it's a valiant effort to get glute max to turn off. So it's just an important distinction to make. We want our glutes on. They're helpful. They're wonderful. But we just don't want them overdoing it, right? It's just like trying to find that balance that we're seeking in all of our muscles. Okay, so now we can explore Shalabhasana, and then we'll take a break. If you're hankering for a break, it's coming. So syllable by syllable, Shalabhasana. Basana. Labasana. Shalabha. Shalabhasana. Shalabhasana. So there are a few different arm variations here that you can't see because they're underneath the body. So I'm actually going to demo them standing, which I recommend you do for your students if you teach, holding this pose for a while. So the classic version has the arms underneath the body squeezed together so they go inside of your hip bones. This is uncomfortable for a lot of people, and it can actually be harmful if people have mobile joints. It can actually cause the elbows to hyperextend. So other options include making fists and having the hands face each other, because now my elbow creases, instead of being like that, are like this. So this is just a little gentler. Even more gentle is fists or palms the other way, because now when the weight of my body presses on my elbows bend instead of hyperextending, right? So most intense, more chill, more chill. Sometimes that's still uncomfortable, right? Just depending on our arms, our chests, the shape of our bodies. So it is totally fine to have the hands outside of the body as well. We've got lots of options. In yoga last week, we had our hands here and we were just doing leg lifts. So, you have a huge variety of what to do with the hands. The most important thing is the toning of the glutes, right? So feel free to try a few different options, and then I will, of course, also cue you. So come to the belly. And let's actually start, let's just take the arms out of it. Let's just have our hands, just like we did for Cobra, so that you don't even have to think of them at first. And you can either have the chin on the mat or the forehead, whatever is more comfortable. We'll start with one leg at a time, which you can call Urdhva Shalabhasana, half Shalabhasana. So starting with the right leg, just start to reach the ball of the right foot back as much as you can, as if you were trying to pull the thigh bone away from the hip socket. And as you reach it back, just notice if it naturally wants to start to float up a little bit, and you can allow it to float, but you don't have to overdo it. Observe the breath, observe the muscles on the back of the hip, the different glutes, and imagine those muscles. You can lift and lower it, just like we did in Cobra. Try to imagine all the layers of the glute muscles turning on. And just take a few pulses with the right leg. And then when you're ready, switch sides and start by reaching the foot back and not even worrying about reaching it up, right? Reaching it back is going to help you get more even tone. Nice. And so Urdhva Shalabhasana is actually quite easy to do with your hands outside of the body. We'll have some options for our arms, and then we'll try both legs. So take a moment to place the arms underneath the body. I'm going to recommend palms into the body so it's gentler on your elbows, and then try to squeeze the elbows in. If that's not comfortable, then it is okay for them to come outside of the body. But if it's comfortable, there are some physical benefits from having the arms underneath the body. If you've got bony hips and it's uncomfortable on your forearms, squeezing your hands into fists can help the muscles in the forearms be more comfortable. So, Carol, we're just taking one of the in the body options, under the body options. And then, this is sort of fun, without moving your arms, reach them down towards the legs and just notice what happens to the shoulders and the upper body. Just through that reaching, notice any sense of more support. And then we'll start with Urdhva Shalabhasana. Reach, let's start with the left foot this time. Reach the left foot back and let it start to float up. And then switch to the right foot. And imagine you're swimming in slow motion and just let the feet alternate. Keep reaching the hands back so it's a full body experience. And then you do not have to do this, but you have the option to try reaching both feet back at the same time. And the feet can be apart, or if it's okay on the low back, they can squeeze together. And just keep reaching them back, and then gently release the feet down. And then wiggle from side to side so that you can release the arms from underneath the body. Squeeze the elbows into the ribs. Let the palms float wide, drawing a W with the hands. And we'll do one last variation where we alternate the legs, but we're going to add the body in. So this is actually a combination of Cobra and Shalabhasana. So lift the right leg and then start to hover the body like Cobra, and look over the left shoulder like you're trying to see the right foot. You'll gently side bend and then switch. So switch legs and allow your body to sway the other way. And if it's comfortable, you can allow the hands to hover or they can stay down. And just think about staying really long so there's no compression in the back. And then come back to center, pause, observe the breath, observe the low back. If you would like a counter pose, you can press the hips back to the heels, but you don't have to. And take any notes you might have, or of course you're welcome to ask questions. All of those variations are on the blog, so you can see, you know, the side to side one, the one leg at a time. How did that go? Were you able to find something comfortable to do with your arms? Okay. Cool.
I tried the fist, but it was better with the palms down.
Great. Great. Yeah. You'll notice in today's yoga class and last Wednesday, we did the kicky legs, but we just kept our hands like this because sometimes it's just easier to just feel like, don't even worry about it. But like in a level 1 foundational class, you know, where you're spending more time and you really want them to stay there and experience it, it's worth it, you know, to take the time to give lots of options. So there's different ways to approach it. All right. Any questions? Carol, I saw you exploring the side to side one. Did you enjoy that one?
Yeah, I really. I kind of felt like I was like swimming a little bit. It was cool.
Yay. I like swimming, so I support that. Well, great job. Let's take a break and you can do whatever you want, but maybe you'll notice your breath for one moment on your break. See you guys in a little bit. We'll do our first thing I saw was a 7-minute countdown, so you deserve an extra minute today. Oops. Okay. Hello? How's
Hi.
that phone thing going? Is that working out okay?
Yeah, it's working on my end, so as long as it hasn't been an issue.
Not at all. It's been really clear. I'm sorry I didn't think to tell you about it sooner, but I'm really glad that it is working now.
Me too. And the video is better too. It hasn't been like
Huh, that's so
static.
interesting. Maybe when it doesn't have to do both audio and video, it like, it's smoother or I don't know.
Yeah. I'll take it.
Yeah. Um, so before we do our next pose, I thought we could do a little warm up. And it's something that I talked a little bit about in class yesterday. But I don't get to like see really if you have questions. So we're gonna do some eagle crunches as a way to build support in the front of the body. And I think, and I would love your feedback, Amy, I think this will be a really nice way to turn on the pelvic floor. And so actually I was thinking about you a lot, Amy, because from yesterday's yoga class and then getting ready for today's yoga class, I've just, like, you've been inspired me so much to just incorporate more for that. So I hope it's helpful. Thanks for the inspiration. So for eagle crunches, this is eagle pose, and so that's why they're called eagle crunches, because we'll cross our arms and our legs. But you'll have options. You don't have to do a tight cross of the arms or legs if it's not comfortable. So make your way onto your back. And cross your right leg over your left. And keep the legs crossed like that. Or if it's comfortable, you can allow the right toes to tuck under the left calf. Just make sure the hips don't feel uncomfortable there. Sometimes my hips don't like it unless I'm really warmed up. So just try to honor your body. And when the right leg's on top, the left arm's on top. So you can give yourself a big hug with your left arm on top. And then bring the backs of the hands together. Option to bring the palms together. Just make sure you choose something that's comfortable. And then gently start to squeeze the knees and elbows towards each other, lifting up for a crunch. And then lengthen the knees and elbows away from one another, almost like you're tightening like a rope. And just take a few pulses like this and really notice the front of the body turning on to support you. And notice how the thighs are squeezing. And so the engagement of the core can almost travel down into the pelvic floor and the inner thighs. You don't have to lift very high, just as much as you'd like to feel that control and support. And the next time you lift, pause there, uncross the legs, place the feet down. Notice the abs still engaging as you slowly set your head down, and try to keep the abs slightly turned on as you gently lift the hips. So there's a sense of the front of the body being on even as it stretches. And then set the hips down, and let's go to the other side. So left leg on top, cross it once or twice, whatever's most comfortable. Hug yourself, right arm on top, backs of hands or fronts of hands together. And then just take a few pulses here. Doesn't matter how much you lift. It's really just about just feeling those muscles turn on. And then the next time you lift, uncross the legs, plant the feet in front of your hips, and try to control, setting up for bridge. And then try to feel the top of the body still on as the hips lift a little bit, and then set everything down. And you can just rock and roll forward and back on the spine if it's comfortable. And then come up to seated. Close the eyes from seated and just bring your awareness to the front of the body and notice any warmth or support. And before we take that into our pose, I just want to see if there are any questions.
I'll just say, like, that felt really good. And I liked how the inner thigh was turning on because of the legs. Whenever I do stuff like that, I have to think so hard about the length of my torso so that my TVA turns on. Like, that's the most important thing for me, that support there. And then the inner thighs. So anyway.
Yeah, great feedback. And I'm excited because in class today, and thank you for that information because I'm learning, and so that's really helpful for me to know. We are going to have our legs set up in that way, and we're going to be playing and drawing circles. And so I imagine as the legs start to circle away from the body, it will maybe help that happen.
As long as the front muscles, and I forget those, as long as the front muscles aren't taking over, like as long as I keep pushing my back into the mat and stuff. Anyway, it's a super conscious thing for me to not let the more superficial muscles take over on my core. Yeah,
that's, I think the one I just did, I feel like that will be more holistic and less where this dominates. So very helpful. Thank you. So we are going to do Anjaneyasana next. And I wanted you guys to feel the support from the front of the body because it's easier when you're working against gravity, when you literally have to use it to lift up. And so you can get away without using it here, but I am going to encourage you guys to just almost like pretend you're doing a crunch and just see how it changes your Anjaneyasana. But first, let us pronounce it. So syllable by syllable, Anjaneyasana, Neyasana, Jane, Anjane, Anjaneyasana, Anjaneyasana, Anjaneyasana. Great, and I just want to take a glance at the blog because there are infinite different ways to do this pose, and I want to be consistent. Yay, okay, so there are a few different ways to get into the pose, and I think it'll be easiest for me to just quickly demo all the different varieties, and then I can teach you guys into it. The easiest way for everybody is from kneeling to just step the foot forward, right? That's the most accessible. From hands down, you can also do it. It's actually quite challenging from table. It takes a lot of core strength, so it's not going to be comfortable for everyone, but you can bounce forward and back, and then that helps spring the leg forward. I find it the most accessible from down dog because when you lift the leg, there's like a pendulum swinging action that helps get the foot forward, but not everyone's going to be able to do it. It does take core strength, and then also depending on the size of people's thighs and the size of their torso, it can feel like there's not enough space, like it's just not comfortable. So from kneeling is just going to be the friendliest and most accessible, but then there's fun other ways to play with getting there. So let's do the first one from kneeling. So take a moment to stand on the knees. You can always place a blanket underneath the knees if it's uncomfortable. If you don't have a blanket, you can fold over the back of your mat so you get like a double padding, but you still have space in front of you. And then bring the hands to the hips and shift the weight into the right knee. Step the left foot forward. When we're kneeling, we usually go to a pretty short stance. So it can be useful to tell people to scooch the front foot forward so there's a little bit of room for the pelvis to shift. And then let's release our hands down inside of the foot. So to the inside of the left foot, and you can even walk the left foot over to the left. Before doing Anjaneyasana, it can be really nice to release the muscles in the hips and just get things fluid and gliding. So just draw some little circles with the hips and imagine you're like hula hooping. And so and slow down, Mel. And imagine you're not trying to stretch the hips. You're just trying to get the thigh bone to release and soften away from the pelvis. You're just like gently articulating that space. So we call these hula hoops, and I often do them like at least once in a class because they're so beneficial to people who sit a lot. If you don't feel like you've got enough room to explore, try walking the front foot forward and to the left a little bit more so it really feels like you can draw a generous circle. And then place the hips evenly between the back knee and the front heel so you feel stable, and start to push down on the front foot. Press the hips forward and let the spine slowly stack. Reach the arms up and gently bend into the front knee. And we'll take a couple of pulses. So kick into the front leg, let the arms release, coming to center so you feel really stable. And then bend the knee and reach the arms up, letting the heart open. So push into the leg, let the hips come back a little bit, almost like you're kneeling. And then bend into the knee. Let the front of the body open. And take a few pulses like this while I watch, and just try to feel that sense of the inner thighs hugging together and the front of the body supporting you as you lift any amount. Keep the low back nice and soft here, and try to feel the body lengthening and reaching up out of the hips. Nice. And then next time you enter the pose, if you would like to stay there for a moment, you're welcome to observe the breath. Make sure you're not holding. Let the breath be smooth and natural. And then step the foot back, and I just like to see if there's any questions before we do the second side. Cool. So for the second side, you're welcome to enter from kneeling if that was comfortable. I will also teach how to do it from down dog, so you're welcome to try that too. So if you are exploring down dog, start in plank. That will tell you the distance the hands should be from the feet. Bend the knees towards the mat, but keep them hovering. Push into the hands to reach the hips high. And then start to press into the hands so much that you push your hips back and you push a lot of weight into the feet. And then push into the feet, sending the weight forward, and just take a couple of springs like this, shifting the weight from the hands to the feet. The next time you start to shift the weight forward, let the right leg step forward with you. Try to use that momentum to just spring it forward. And often in this position, the foot just ends up in the right spot because of the distance. If that didn't work, you can always come to kneeling and step the right foot forward that way. Drop the back knee and then take your slow, smooth hula hoop circling the hips to the side and then back to the other side and down. Notice the breath here and try to keep a lot of space in the hip socket. So it's just like a three-dimensional exploration of the hip socket. Not trying to stretch, just trying to find fluidity and space. And then find center with the pelvis. It is fine to walk the right foot closer back if you feel like you need a little more support underneath you. And then push down into the feet to slowly rise up. Let the arms lift just like we did before. And we'll do we'll do it the same way. So kick into the front leg, bringing the hips back a little bit, and then bend the front knee and allow the arms to reach back. So a few pulses, just subtly closing the front of the body so you feel everything tightening and supporting you at the center, and then bend the front knee and allow the spine to unfurl. And then if you would like to pause at any point, you're welcome to. And just try to observe the breath. Don't worry about going very deep into a back bend. Just make sure the spine feels supported. All right. Something that I just want to point out in the image, if you look at the guy that's dressed all in black, you can see how far back his knee is. And it really shows that even though you don't come into a dramatic bend with the upper spine, you still are getting a huge stretch in the front of the body, down into the hip and the quad. Do you see that? Cool.
The one we did before this one, what was the name of that one?
Shalabhasana.
Okay.
I can put that on the screen really quick. I just want to make sure I'm saying the right one. And I know that we discovered yesterday, Mel, that you didn't know about the blog. So all of these are on the blog. If you can like download a PDF with all of this on it. So that was Shalabhasana. Any questions about Anjaneyasana? Caro, I see you rolling out your hip. Did Anjaneyasana do something to you? Huh. I still can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You can?
Yes.
Okay. No, it was just a good stretch. Like, it opened things up, so then I just wanted to roll that one
Great.
part.
Just checking. Yay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Um, okay, good. So a couple of things that I want to say about this pose. A lot of people have really tight hip flexors, right? Our culture, it's like whenever we're in a car, whenever we're on a couch, whenever we're at a desk, the things that we do most of the day, people's hips get tight. And so people benefit from hip openers like this pose, but generally we do them in a certain way. And we're always stretching the exact same spot on the hip. So that hula hooping action is almost like to try to stretch the entire group across the front of the hip from different angles. So that's why it's so useful in our culture. And it's similar to when we do our hamstring stretches, right? And we, instead of just going forward, we allow our body to move a little bit. Same idea, right? We're just trying to spread it out so that the whole area, the whole fascial network can start to open and glide rather than just like, oh, this one muscle, I always stretch it in the same place. Having said that, we explored kind of one dimension here, and hopefully it felt really good. It's also fair game, to add in some side bends. It's totally fine to add gentle twists, because of the nature of this pose where the spine's mostly neutral. You can do a lot of different things with the spine to explore the hips, right? So I showed you one of the most basic ways, but I just want to plant the seed that this pose, like, it's almost like anything is possible. You can try a lot of fun things here that are very safe. So this is a good exploration pose. Any questions? Okay. So we'll look at another muscle group. This muscle group is called the adductors, and what you're seeing here is the inner thigh. So you can see like the bottom of the pelvis, these muscles attach at the bottom of the pelvis and then down into the thigh bone. So when these muscles are engaged, they draw the thighs together, but they also help stabilize the pelvis, right? So in our eagle pose, as the legs wrapped, and I cued to almost like extend the elbows and the knees to lengthen away from one another like you're tightening a rope. That really gets these muscles firing so that the low back via the pelvis is more stable, right? And I want to demo what it looks like when the pelvis is not stable, because maybe you do this or you certainly will see it in future students because it's so common. So the adductors are pulling down on the bottom of the pubic symphysis, which is where the two sides of the pelvis meet in the front of the body. And so if I don't have a lot of support on my pelvis, when I go to bend back, my low back might arch a little bit. Oh, I'm wearing the perfect pants. Okay, so imagine this pink band is representing my pelvis. So here, my pelvis is level, and you can see that, right? Because it's like a straight line across. But if my pelvis tips forward, see how the pink band tips forward and now it's at an angle? Can you see that? So neutral is a more supported place for my pelvis to be. Here, I don't have my adductors on. I don't have my, my core on. So my pelvis tips forward. You can see what happens to my spine when my pelvis tips forward.
You bend into it a lot.
I am away from the computer. Did you say my back was bending a lot? Yeah. Yeah. Could you guys see that? Could you see how when my pelvis tilted, like my low back arched more? So think about if that's my starting position, right? My low back is overarched, and then I go to bend it more. It can cause a lot of compression and pressure and tightness in the low back. Has anyone ever felt any of those sensations at the low back? Yeah. Or all of them all the time? Yeah. I definitely have suffered from those sensations, of course, myself. So ways that we can help with that, what we did in the last round, we brought a little more awareness to the front of the body. Rectus abdominis attaches to the top of the pelvis, and so having that turn on naturally, not isolated, but like turn on as part of the core cylinder, pulls up on the front of the pelvis, right? And then having the adductors on plays like a little tug of war with rectus abdominis so that the thighs are very stable, the core is very stable, and the pelvis becomes very stable. So we'll experiment a little bit with just being aware of the inner thighs in our next pose. Hopefully they're already kind of like ready to come aboard because of the eagle crunches we did. But now we'll just bring extra awareness as we move into our next pose. Does that make sense to everybody? Just like why, even though it's the inner thighs and doesn't have to do with the back, why that would help our spine feel more supported in our back bend? Cool. It might be useful. If you have a block, great. I know before you guys found a block-like thing. I don't know if it will work for this purpose, but if we could place something about this size between the inner thighs, just to give us feedback, right? Just to like be aware of that space. Yeah, a book, great. So here's the funny thing. We don't want these muscles to overengage, right? Because we've learned that that's dysfunctional too. So walk the feet a comfortable distance underneath the hips and just feel the block, book, pillow, whatever you've got. Just feel where it's contacting the body. And then ever so gently start to, actually, let's try this a different way. Lift the toes, press down into the balls of the feet and the heels so that the feet are really like pushing and active. And as you do that, allow the crown of the head to start to lift. Like you're pulling the head and the feet apart. And as the feet and the head pull apart, imagine everything in the center tightening. And notice if there's just a sense of awareness of the inner thighs without forcing anything to happen. If you do not feel any muscles in the inner thighs turning on as you do this, you can ever so gently squeeze the block with the thighs, but really try to keep it gentle. And then keep pushing down into the feet to lift the crown of the head. And then let all of that go. Let everything like soften, almost like you're just like slouching. And let's try this one more time with the hands on the waist. And I think it'll be interesting as you push down into the feet to lift the crown of the head and gently squeeze the block. Does anybody feel any muscles underneath their fingertips just like turning on or becoming a little tighter? You can just give me a wave if you're feeling that. Okay. Yay. I see you, Mel. So I think this is a good example of how the inner thighs can naturally start to fire up when the whole body is like reaching and lengthening. Sometimes it takes a little bit of prodding, right? Like maybe you had to try squeezing the thighs a little bit at first, and now you're noticing like, oh, they're doing it on their own. And so now place the block off to the side and see if you can just be aware of the sensation in the thighs without actually having the item. Like I could literally feel those muscles get hard and push into the item. Can you feel them just by putting your eyeballs inside of your body? Just turning on your interoception. Gently push down into the feet. And to give yourself a little extra challenge, push your hands down into your hips. So it's almost like you're anchoring your hips down. And see if that helps you lift and lengthen away from the hips. Just creating a little extra challenge. And now with all of these muscles engaged, in a gentle way, right? Hopefully you can breathe smoothly and naturally. Slowly come down to kneeling. Tuck the toes under and push down into the balls of the feet and the knees to do the same thing, to just stand up really tall, squeezing that invisible block ever so gently, letting the spine lengthen and turn on. And just notice how much stability you have here. If you want to explore the stability a little bit more, you can place the hands at the low back, fingertips down, and just gently allow the elbows to come towards one another, noticing the front of the body opening any amount. Observe the breath. Let the breath be smooth and natural. And just slowly start to circle the right arm forward and then up. Let that lengthen the whole front of the body. And then allow the arm to reach back and just notice how much strength it takes for that counterbalance. Just take a few slow circles, trying to feel the support of the whole body as the arm reaches back and the spine just gently lengthens. And then yeah, nice. You can switch arms. And it is okay if the body's twisting. Feel free to keep the body a little more forward and see if you can use the arm to extend a little bit more. So as it reaches up, notice the heart lifting and notice the upper spine bending. Just a little bit, not too deep. More about stretching through the front of the body. And then place both hands on the low back and just take a moment to breathe and open. And then imagine you're doing a crunch. Let those muscles slowly pull you back to center. And just pause. Observe the breath. Notice if the breath has changed at all. Sometimes more strenuous movements can heighten the breath. Okay, let's talk about it. I know we just went right into our next pose, And actually that wasn't even our next pose, but it just seemed like a really natural place to do that pose. Did anybody feel something new supporting them as they played with bending back? Kara.
I just noticed that my glutes had to work like harder to keep my pelvis in that more neutral position. And I think because I struggle already with like having my pelvis very like tilted forwards, it just takes that like extra, and it still is hard for me to even get to a neutral position. So yeah, but it's just like,
Was it with the glutes engaged, did it feel comfortable? Did it feel safe? Or did it feel like the low back was still a little because the pelvis was tilted?
It felt safe with the low back. I noticed, yeah, my shoulders just like, I'm wondering if how the shoulders are supposed to be in these types of back bends, like, are they relaxed or are they kind of, are they like engaged more?
Yeah, the shoulders can really support us a lot here, because if you think about the fact that we're trying to open the upper spine, we really are using the muscles that are underneath the shoulders quite a bit. So it's absolutely fine. Like Cobra, right? Remember Cobra, how we dragged the hands back to turn these muscles on? Like, so that definitely happens here too. You don't want it to feel like they're straining. Like, remember in the twists when we did too much in the arms and you really felt it underneath the shoulders, where it was like, whoa, this is like coming from the shoulders and not from the core? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like you don't want to experience it in that way, where it's like, whoa, the shoulders are firing and like on fire. But you certainly want those muscles to be supporting you. Is that clear?
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And something that, Caro, I want you to pay attention to, because after seeing your pelvis, it's out of like my scope of practice to diagnose anything or prescribe anything, but it seems like, oh wow, okay, it's hard for you to level your pelvis, right? And I have experienced that myself. So from my own experience, what was causing that was tightness in the front of my hips. These muscles being really tight, and so it was like I couldn't let them go. And then the funny thing is, so you're like, oh, it takes a lot of glutes, which is good, right? If the glutes are firing evenly. But sometimes when this muscle is like really, really tight, trying to stretch this muscle, it almost is like a red alert to our nervous system, where this muscle gets like tighter, right? It's almost like, oh gosh, what's going on? Like I have to freeze. I don't feel safe here. So the answer to opening and stretching here is definitely stability, but it's not necessarily like just going to come from squeezing the glutes more, right? It's almost like the back of the body, including the glutes, but also the muscles in the back and the hamstrings, as they get stronger and more supportive, this muscle will naturally start to feel like, oh, I feel safe. Like I feel supported. I don't have to do all this extra work. I can start to let go. So instead of thinking of it as like this battle of like, oh, this muscle's tight, so I'm going to play tug of war and like make this muscle like yank against it, try to think of it as like, this muscle's tight because it's doing too much work. And we want to like bring more friends onto the team to be like, oh, hey, I can help you. Right? So as you explore
Yeah.
the pelvis, almost try to feel like support is coming from the top of the pelvis, from the back of the pelvis, so that these muscles can start to like feel like, oh, I don't have to do it all alone. Does that resonate? Do you feel like that might be helpful?
Yeah, that is super helpful. I think I got a sense of that I was like maybe over engaging the glutes, and I just have this kind of pattern with my hips, I think, from always stretching the hamstrings and not stretching the front as much, like the quads too. I don't know if it has to do with like tighter quads, but yeah, I guess the whole goal is balance. So
Yeah, I think it's gonna take time, but just having the awareness in back bends, instead of thinking of like, okay, the strong muscles in my back are gonna like fire up so all of this releases. Think of it as like the whole body is like supporting me so that I can lengthen the front of my body. Because when it's a tug of war between front and back, usually something's dysfunctional, right? But if
right.
it starts to just be this like holistic experience where everything's turning on a little bit, then everybody wins.
Yay.
Yeah.
Super helpful.
Yay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Cool. One last thing I'll say is here's the funny thing with that pelvis thing. When the pelvis is tipped forward like that, sometimes you, how do, oh, okay, I had to do it. You don't even really feel a stretch. Do you, Caro, do you feel a stretch in the front of the hips when your pelvis is tipped forward like that? Or do you feel it like more in the low back?
I do feel it actually right in my hip flexor. I think the hip flexors are so tight that like any amount of this kind of opening stretches feels like I feel a stretch there. But they
Yeah.
kind of anchor my hip in.
Great. Actually, that actually sounds better than what I was doing in my body to mimic it. And I think those hula hoops can be really helpful because.
Yeah, those are like changing my life. I love them.
Okay, that's your homework. A hula hoop a day.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for your patience as we explore. So we skipped ahead to Ustrasana. So I just want you guys to see that on the screen for a second, and we'll just pronounce it. Ustrasana, notice that there's a mark underneath the S, so it actually sounds like sh. So syllable by syllable, Ustrasana. Ustrasana. Strasana. Ustra. Ustrasana. Ustrasana. And so that was the pose that we just did where we were just working with like pulling on our pelvis from all directions so that it was really nice and stable as the spine lengthened. And we didn't bring both hands down. Instead, we just allowed one hand at a time because that can just turn way more on in our core and prevent like the low back from like crunching. So now we'll rewind to Setta Bandha Sarvangasana. So this is our bridge pose, and we can practice saying it syllable by syllable. Setta Bandha Sarvangasana. Gasana, Vangasana, Survangasana, Bandha, Seta Bandha, Survangasana, Seta Bandha Survangasana, Seta Bandha Survangasana. Cool. So something I want you guys to see is the difference in their proportions. So Satyam's fingertips are like beyond his heels, whereas Yogini, though her hands are clasped, you know, so her fingers aren't extended, but I feel like even if her fingers were extended, maybe they'd be like almost touching the heels. So I want you guys to see that because it means there's not a specific place for the feet. What's more important is that the knees feel supported, right? So I see what's most often the feet are too far forward. It feels like awkward and like hard to support your body. And if the feet are too close in, the knees come past the ankles and it just doesn't feel very good or stable in the knees. So Yogini is a really good example of just seeing like, oh, okay, the knees over the ankle, that's generally a supported position. And I'll talk you guys into exploring that a little bit and trying to find support. So let's do it. Come to your mat, please. And bend the knees and walk the feet in towards the hips, but make sure they're wide enough that the low back feels relaxed and that the legs and knees feel supported. And when we lift our hips, the knees are going to go forward. So you want the heel bone to be slightly forward of the knee, just ever so slightly, maybe half an inch. And then reach the hands towards the heels. And as you reach the hands, let the shoulder blades start to walk down the back. So there's just a little more space in the top of the shoulders and the neck, the base of the skull. And start to just gently press into the feet and just like you're standing. And notice what muscles in the legs turn on. And then reach the fingertips towards the heels. And notice what muscles in the shoulders and the arms turn on. Just keeping this gentle reaching and pressing with the hands, shoulders, and feet. Gently allow the hips to start to lift away from the floor, any amount. And then set one vertebra down at a time, and the pelvis last. Just do this a couple of times. And each time you set the hips down, give yourself permission to adjust the placement of your feet. Sometimes as soon as the hips set down, it's like you notice like, oh, I want my feet to walk forward a little bit, or I want them to walk closer to my hips. And so just take a few pulses to be aware of the feet, set the hips down, and let them readjust any amount. Nice. And then the next time you lift up, just to make sure nothing's too tight or rigid, imagine you're like a hammock. Let the hips just ever so gently sway from the right and the left, just a little bit. If you're in too deep of a back bend, that won't feel very good. So it's okay if your hips are a little lower than usual. And then bring the hips to center, reach the hands towards the heels. Option to interlace the hands beneath you and squeeze the arms together to get a little extra lift in the spine, but just make sure you can still breathe. Try to observe your natural breath flow here. Bring your awareness to your feet and just try to bring equal weight to the inside and outside of the feet. Can push down a little bit more to energize the legs. Good. And then to release, ungrip the hands, let the arms come outside the body, and slowly set the hips down. The next thing I'm going to teach you is not something you have to memorize, but Caro, this is something that really helped my hips, so I just want you to feel it and see if it's useful to you. Lift your feet towards the sky and shake out the legs and be real, like way gentler. Yeah, good. So that you almost feel like, you know, the jiggliness of your thighs. Like let that happen, right? Let things start to come away from the bone a little bit. And then start to reach the feet towards the wall ahead of you. So you're lengthening through the whole body. The knees can stay bent or the legs can be straight as long as there's no discomfort in the front of the pelvis. And then when the heels touch down, start to drag the heels slowly in towards the sits bones, coming back to that bridge setup. And try to feel the backs of the legs pulling the heels in. So the hamstrings engaging. Nice. And then when your feet get to your comfortable bridge setup, reach the hands towards the heels, gently lift the hips back into bridge. And then set the hips down, and we're going to do that again. So hips down, legs up, shake it out. And then reach the feet forward, knees bent or extended just to lengthen, turning on all those muscles in the core. And then drag the heels back, engaging through the back of the hips, the back of the legs. And once the feet make it to your comfortable bridge pose, just naturally lift back up. Notice if there's a buoyancy in the hips as the heels drag in. And then set everything down. And if you're enjoying that sequence, you're welcome to do 1 or 2 more rounds on your own. Otherwise, you can hug the knees into the chest or do some gentle windshield wipers. And I see people taking their notes, which is great. If anybody has questions, of course, please ask away. So, how did you determine where to put your feet? Did anybody have have to move their feet a little bit and then find like a moment where you're like, oh, that feels more supportive? I'm just curious how that went for you guys. Or do you feel like, I don't know where to put my feet? Because then we should talk about that.
I've worked on that a lot, so I felt pretty comfortable with where my feet were just intuitively without moving around too much.
Cool. How about the sequence when the heels dragged back? Did anybody feel any differently in the pose as the heels dragged back and then you lifted the hips? Did that help support anything new?
Yes. I really like that. It helped me like feel more evenly supported through the legs. And then which naturally made my back feel better in it. So yeah, thanks for that.
Great. Yeah, I don't teach it the exact same way every time, but one of my favorite ways to teach bridge is from laying down to slowly drag the heels in, just to get that chain on the back of the legs and the hips firing. So it's not just like squeeze glutes, but instead it's like this whole connection of the back of the body turning on so that the pelvis can lift in a more effortless way. So if you felt that, feel free to write down that trick. Okay. So we've talked about this a little bit, but I'm glad that you are seeing a slide on this. When we were talking about the tug of war of the pelvis, right, of the adductors pulling on the bottom of the pubic symphysis, we've got the hamstrings pulling on the sits bones. What's pulling on the top of the pelvis is rectus abdominis, our crunch muscle, our internal and external obliques, as well as transverse abdominis is actually also there. So basically, if our core cylinder is engaged, then we have a little extra help in supporting the pelvis, which is funny, right? We don't always think of the things above being able to support the pelvis, but this will actually just gently lift the front of the pelvis so that our famous anterior pelvic tilt is a little more neutral, right? So this is just participating in that same thing that we've been working on already in so many poses. Does that make sense to everyone? Can you guys like visualize or even feel how this is participating with what your pelvis is doing? Okay. There's one more anatomical concept that has to do with these same muscles, and it's called eccentric contraction. So most normally when we think of muscle contraction, it's what's on the left, concentric contraction, which is the muscle shortening as it turns on. So you pick up something heavy, you feel the muscle turn on, and as you lift it, the muscle shortens, right? It's sort of like the most natural way to use our muscles because we don't have to necessarily be very skillful with our body to feel that happening or for that to happen on its own. It's like you lift something and that's what has to happen. Eccentric contraction is something that should ideally be happening, but we're learning that we've pattern certain things in our body that are not optimal, and it's okay. It's never too late to rewire things. What eccentric contraction is when you're holding that heavy thing, the weight actually is a better example, this lady, slowly controlling the descent of the weight, that muscle's still on, right? But now it's lengthening. So this is something that people often need to be taught. It's almost like we're holding the weight and it's hard to have control, so like it just drops, right? You know, or like we move a little too fast. It's like we move slow here because it's hard, but it's really easy to just let gravity take that weight. And so we move a little too fast at that part. Eccentric contraction is a really incredible way to build muscle stability. So it actually is very beneficial, right? It's going to make you stronger faster than concentric contraction. So how does this relate to our back bends? Well, what I've been trying, and I don't know whether it's working or not, but in like doing those eagle crunches, especially yesterday, I cued some things in that yoga class where it was like, imagine you're doing a crunch, feel that engage, and then start to lengthen it. The goal, the idea was to get you experiencing eccentric contraction. And we're gonna do more of that in class today. So if it hasn't yet like synced up, it's okay, it takes time. But give me a thumbs up if it just makes sense, that muscle can be engaged, but then you can be stretching it. Okay, and then give me another thumbs up if you have felt that in your body where there's like more support and control as you're stretching. Okay, and that's okay, don't feel bad. It will be very exciting when that starts to turn on. Something that we can do, might sound silly, but just having that awareness of like being like, okay, fire, right? Like stay fired as I stretch can help. So you just having that in mind and bringing awareness to that area literally will help the brain and the body learn how to do that. So if you haven't yet felt it, just imagine in these poses, like, okay, like imagine you're doing a crunch, imagine that muscle contraction, and then try to keep it as you lengthen the muscle. Do you guys feel like you can begin that adventure? At least, like that makes sense? Okay, cool. So I want to show you Ustrasana one more time. I know it's on the bottom of the screen there, but just so that you can see it a little bigger. So can you imagine how that would help you in this pose? Like if all of those muscles were engaged as they lengthened versus just like, whoop. What do you think the difference would be in the experience or in your body? Like, why would having those muscles on be useful?
Pressure out of your back for sure.
I'm
don't.
I'm gonna mute my. Can you repeat that?
It takes pressure out of your back. Like it's so much more supportive of your lower back, and it allows you to have an even bend instead of like at one spot bend.
Great, you checked a lot of boxes there. So it's going to be more supportive. It's going to feel better on the low back. And the reason it feels better on the low back is because the pelvis is more supported. So bouncing back to this. So these are the muscles that are on, right? And these muscles are pulling on the top of the pelvis. So if these muscles are on, there's just naturally going to be more length in the low back because the pelvis isn't going to be doing that, right? So it feels a lot better in the low back. It builds strength. And then, you know, maybe, Caro, I don't know, but maybe it'll help to start allowing those muscles that are so tight to lengthen, right? Because these muscles are connected. The quads and the hip flexors connect up into our core. So it's fun and it's functional. So let's try one of our deeper back bends. We'll do Ekapada Kapotasana, pigeon pose. And if you're following along, I apologize, I skipped around a lot. This is slide 171. So first we'll say it and then we'll do it. Syllable by syllable. Ekapada Kapotasana. And eka means one, so we'll just say that word eka. And pada means foot, pada. And then our last word is pigeon, pose. Kapotasana. And break it down a little, potasana. Kapotasana. Ekapada. Ekapada Kapotasana. Ekapada Kapotasana. So most people are used to doing the counter pose, which is where you rest forward over the front leg. It's a very deep stretch on the hip rotators. But Ekapada Kapotasana is actually a back bend. And so you can see when they're upright how similar it is to a pose like Anjaneyasana, right? Where the leg is behind the body and you're getting like a deep front stretch and then, you know, like not a tremendous big back bend, but the whole front of the body is stretching. Anjaneyasana is here. Ekapada Kapotasana, the front knee is down. One thing that we're going to change, for those of you that have experience with this pose, a lot of teachers cue you to swivel the front shin as far forward as possible. And what we're discovering in modern yoga, after, you know, practitioners have now been doing it for decades, is that deep of external hip rotation is actually not healthy. So there are starting to be lots of injuries for those long-time practitioners. As we know, you know, yoga in the West is fairly new, so it's taken time to start to see these injuries happen. So I personally do not externally rotate my hips super, super deeply. There's a level to which it's functional. Oh, harmonium. There's a level to which it's like functional and useful, right? But then like going deeper and further just starts to put pressure in the hip socket and in the sacroiliac joint. So the way that we encourage people to do it now is with less of a swivel. So instead of swiveling like this, it's like a little more linear. Sometimes I even call it linear pigeon. Or Satyam likes to call it bird on a wire. So I just want to demo that here. Instead of swiveling my shin out front a whole lot, it's more tucked into my body. And that just takes the intensity out of my hip socket. So it is totally fine if you want to explore, you know, what feels most useful and comfortable to you, but that's what I feel safe and healthy teaching, and it might be very different than what you're used to. So are there any questions, or do you feel willing to try it? Okay. from plank pose, bring the left knee forward and swivel the shin just a few degrees so the heel is still underneath the body. And then gently start to push into the hands to send the hips back any amount. Set the back knee down. The back toes can stay tucked, or you can flatten the top of the foot, whatever is most comfortable. And then walk the hands in ever so slightly so you feel a lot of support for the shoulders. And as we've done in a few poses, drag the hands back to lengthen the spine. And imagine yourself like a Chinese finger trap where your head and your feet are reaching apart and the middle is tightening. So just letting the whole body lengthen. And then if it's comfortable, the hands can walk in a little bit more. And if you feel supported, the hands can even hover, but that's not comfortable for everybody. And just observe the breath and allow the hips to just gently sway from side to side so that you're not locking up. And then we'll move a little bit in the pose. So bend the elbows, tipping the body forward just a little bit, and notice how the sensations in that left hip might change. And then push down into the front leg, push down into the fingertips to rise back up, letting the legs energize. And just take a few gentle pulses like this. Check in with the low back. Make sure you're not lifting too high. Allow the movement to come from the pelvis, tipping forward and tipping up. Tip the pelvis forward. Let the sits bones drop as you come back up. The next time you tip forward, it's okay to lower onto the elbows. And then just gently sway the hips. So you're not just yanking on those muscles, but you're massaging them. And then to come out, press down into the palms. Slowly lift the back knee. And you can either step back to plank, or you can even lift the left leg high in downward facing dog or in a three-legged table. Sometimes it feels nice to just stretch the front of that hip after it's been stretching the other way. And then before we do the second side, I just want to see if there are any questions. Did that feel okay for people? Okay, so I'm not going to do the second side so that I can just be closer to the computer and observe you. Come into your plank pose. And bring the right knee forward this time. And just swivel the shin just a little bit. And then start to push the hips backward. Lower the back knee. And push down into the legs so you feel the legs energizing, even though they don't have to. Nice. Yeah, Amy, I saw your pelvis get a little more buoyant when you did that. So as you push into the legs, just bring your awareness to your pelvis and let it lift and get lighter. And then walk the hands in any amount so you can start to lengthen the spine. And then we'll do a slightly different exploration. In our last exploration, we folded forward and we came back up, just tipping and untipping the pelvis. For this one, try reaching your right arm forward, lengthening the whole right side of the body, and then reach the arm up and slightly back, just a really small twist. It doesn't have to be intense. And just notice the sensations that travel through the right side of the hip as you circle it. And if that feels good, you can take a few more rounds. And if that is too intense or too much, you can just play with tipping the pelvis in and out of it. That's absolutely fine. And then the next time the hand comes forward, pause, allow the hips to relax just a little bit, but the legs are still aware. Walk the hands forward slightly. You're welcome to come to forearms if you'd like to release a little deeper. And then just let the hips gently rock. Imagine massaging that right hip out and ever so gently press down into the arms, reach the head forward and the foot back. So there's a sense of buoyancy and lightness and not just like dropping and letting everything go. And Mel, you can look down just to relax the neck. Yeah, that looks nice. And then to come out of it, place the palms down, gently push into the hands, tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, and send the right foot back from table or down dog. You can lift the right leg if that feels good on the hip, or anything else that your body's requesting. Nice. So those different examples are on the blog, and there is an image of the setup and just like that little swivel of the shin that is even different than these images, because these images were taken before we learned about the damage that they were causing. And I just want to mention with that spiral, there is a line of fascia called the cross fascial line. And so as we twist towards the leg, we're lengthening the cross fascial line. And I really like teaching that way because it gets a sense of release without feeling like you got to push the hips down more or open the knee more or whatever. So from my experience, that's just a little more functional way to get deeper that isn't harmful. All right, let's take our break because you guys have been in class for another hour and a half. So I'll put a little timer up and we'll come back to wrap up our back bends. How are your hips doing, Caro?
They're really good, actually. Yeah, they're feeling like super open
Yay.
in a good way. Yeah.
Woohoo.
So everything's working.
The magic is working.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at another back bend. This pose is Dhanurasana. And first we'll say it syllable by syllable. Dhanurasana. Nurasana. Dhanur. Dhanurasana. Dhanurasana. And this is bow pose. We usually teach it just one side at a time because I feel like in most of the yoga classes I teach, maybe only like a quarter to a half can comfortably and safely hold both feet, but almost everyone can hold one foot really safely. What happens when people try to hold both feet and their body isn't really set up to do that is this. They have to like squirm around and really have the legs splay quite wide to be able to hold the ankles or the toes. And having the knees that wide puts a lot of pressure in the low back. It's usually an indication that the front of the body isn't open enough to hold them in this way. So it's like we kind of bypass that by letting the legs come out to the side. But it's not really safe or comfortable or even beneficial. But one leg, almost everyone can do with really good form. So we will first do Urdhva Dhanurasana, and then you'll have the option to do both legs, but you absolutely don't have to, and you don't even ever have to teach that because you get all the benefits. You just have to be willing to take the time to do both of them. Any questions before we try it? All right, so come to the belly. It's really nice to do Cobra first so that the muscles in the back are engaging before you reach back for the legs. So take a moment to place the hands in line with the shoulders as far apart from the body that you need to feel comfortable. And then drag the hands back to peel the heart off of the mat. And then extend the left arm forward and tent the fingertips so you have some extra support. Bend the opposite knee, so bend the right knee and reach back towards the right foot, keeping the muscles in the back on. Gently start to kick the right foot into the hand. And it doesn't need to be a lot, but just notice how that helps you lengthen through the right side of the body. Mel, that doesn't look super comfortable. So it's okay if you just bend the knee and reach back, but don't hold the foot. Like just reach and keep your head forward. Yeah, so just reach. And so you can, if you're holding the foot, you can keep holding it and relax and then kick and then relax and then kick. If you're not holding the foot, you can just reach back and lift and then release and then reach back and lift so that there's a sense of getting to come in and out of it, in and out of the stretch. And then release the leg, release the arm, and take a moment at center, bring the forehead to the hands, just letting yourself rest and check in with the low back. Sometimes we can just encourage our bodies to go a little too far. So pay attention, and you've got a second try now to just honor where your body is and maybe not push as much. And so from Cobra, support yourself with the right hand and then bend the left knee, reach back. And either hold on or just keep reaching back. And then just gently kick the foot into the hand and allow the whole left side of the body to expand. And then soften and just take a few pulses like this. And imagine that raft metaphor. So as you kick and expand, imagine yourself filling evenly like a raft being blown up. And then just let everything soften. Try to be aware of the front of the hip linking up into the core, stretching and supporting you. And then if that all felt really good and you want to try both legs, you're welcome to do that. But just notice if the knees splay out a lot, stick to one at a time. If you're ready for a counter pose, you're welcome to also just push the hips back to the heels. And if you're in full boat, gently kick the feet into the hands. Bring your awareness to your pelvis. And just ever so gently release a little bit so you're not overdoing it. And then kick into the feet, allowing the front of the body to extend a little bit more. Check in with the neck. Keep the neck in line with the spine. And then just gently release. You can windshield wiper the legs by bending the knees and just swaying from side to side, or you can press hips back to heels. Dhanurasana, how did it go? Any questions? And Mel, I know it's not super fun when you can't hold on to the foot, so you can totally do like Cobra, you know, to get all of the benefits of lifting the upper body, and you can do Shalabhasana to get all the benefits to the lower body. So you don't have to do this if it felt like, oh, this is not working for me. You can still get all those benefits from other poses. Did anyone like doing it one side at a time? Was that new or different? Well, Amy.
I'd never done it that way, and it was kind of nice to warm up that way too before doing the full thing, just so you could concentrate on what you were feeling a little bit easier.
Great point. I think people aren't used to like noticing like this length, you know, if they do it this way. So that's such a good point. It's like, okay, you feel what's possible, and then it's almost like it keeps you honest in the double version, because you're like, ooh, that doesn't feel as good. That's a really good point. Something that I'm not necessarily going to like encourage, but I just want to share that I've been playing with it in my own practice, and once in a while I'll teach it at like the end of a class, is it can be fun from the half to roll onto the side, and you get a little bit of a massage in the shoulder, but it is kind of an advanced thing that I only teach as an option once they've done it. And it's like, oh, you know, do it the same way. If you want to add the roll, you can. But feel free to play with that in your practice, because it's been really fun for me. All right. So we do have a couple more back bends, but they fit really nicely with our inversions that we'll be learning next week. especially with there being like a full yoga class today. It seems like you've done enough back bending. So for the weekend, you'll only be responsible for the ones that we did in class, and then we'll look at a few more back bends mixed in with our inversions on Tuesday. Just a little side note, when you practice teach these on Tuesday, you know, give yourself the permission to not go super far, you know, to just really be focusing on the breathing and the evenness. I feel like back bends can sort of be the kind of pose that we, if we're not paying attention, can just do too much and not feel great about after. So I'm just going to plant that seed to be really gentle, be really kind. You still get all the benefits. You just won't regret it later. Any questions about any of our back bends or back bends in general before we switch over to the end of warming up? Okay, so warming up. I just want to pull that up on the screen. So you've looked at the purple box. That was our first warm-up session. Mel, that was the one that your power went out. So you'll probably want to look back at that video. Were you able to see the blog? Okay.
Yeah, I opened that up right when you were showing me. I was following the steps.
Oh, great. Awesome. So we've got awakening, interoception. You learned a few different ways to do it. You might develop your own ways. Ideally, you know, that's something that you're practicing yourself because it is sort of awkward. You know, it is a hard thing to cue. So it's like you really need to explore it in your own body before you feel comfortable teaching it. So keep working on that. And then yesterday, Satyam went through the yellow, blue, and green, just like the different areas to be focusing on, and you learned all sorts of different ways to target those areas. So the last thing we're going to look at is putting it all together. So if you're following along, this is slide 263. So step by step by step by step. What this means is you want each movement to feel like just a natural next step. So here's an example. Let's say your interoception was seated onesie, right? You're sitting here. The next movement should just be one step away, right? So maybe that means planting one foot and taking a gentle twist. Or maybe that means rolling over the feet and coming up to standing on your knees, right? So the next movement that you do should just feel like, oh, okay, I'm going to just take one step and I'm there, right? Or maybe even there's something you're seated for and you're like, oh, I want to do this. And then I'm going to come up to kneeling. And I'm going to do something different from kneeling. And then from there, it's like, oh, and then I can take a step and come to standing. So what we're avoiding is like being standing and being like, okay, you know, come down to the belly, right? That would be like 3 steps, right? It literally would be like step 1, fold forward, step 2, back, step 3, knees down, step 4, belly, right? So instead, if you were standing and you had a belly pose, maybe you would take 1 step and do something from forward fold, right? And then you would take another step and do something from a lunge, right? And then take another step. And then eventually you could make it to your belly step by step. And don't worry, you don't have to go from your belly to your standing. That was the most extreme example that I could think of. Maybe, you know, your warm-up is mostly standing and kneeling or whatever movements you like. Does that make sense? Just one step away so it's nice and fluid? Great. This next one, I don't totally agree with. I think you can do some good core work on your back, but this is here to tell you not to just roll around on your back the whole time. Sometimes people like do a lot on their back and then the warm-up's over and it's like you haven't really gotten things flowing. So I'd say maximum one thing on the back, and then you have sort of like a safety net of like, okay, it's allowed, but I'm not going to hang out there too long, right? Does that make sense? And then, my favorite, the best, the most important, right from the mat. It's going to be better. It's going to be clearer. It's going to be so much easier. You've got all these movements, so you could sit at your desk and be like, oh, first I'm going to do this lunge. And then I'm going to step forward to standing. If you're in your body, on your mat, doing it, you're going to feel something interesting. You're going to cue something a little bit better. It's just kind of like I was telling Mel about studying, right? It's like this practice happens on your mat. It happens in your body. So we need to prepare for it and study for it on our mats in our bodies, right? If we're planning it on a piece of paper, it's just not the same. So right from your mat. Any questions about any of those? Okay. This has sort of evolved a little bit. It is just a good thing to consider in the first part of class when people are sort of getting in the zone, that you want it to be easy for them, right? So you might just consider like, is it easy to follow along? Can they see me pretty easily, so that they're not like, you know, turning around and trying to see the screen and confused. As you've seen from my classes, we do start to like move all over the place. But in the beginning, when you're grounding, it's nice to just think of like, okay, is this simple enough, or can they see me really easily that it's going to be grounding and not confusing? The most fun thing is that you get to do this a whole lot, right? You have to warm up every time you do yoga, right? So you've got your morning practice that hopefully you're doing at least a couple times a week. Start with the warm-up that you wrote, you know, like put it into practice. You'll notice like the things that you love, and then maybe you'll change it, you'll adapt it, you'll start to get a sense of how long you want to be in each movement, right? You might feel something and then you'll have a better cue to give for it. So we really encourage the warm-up to be like not just a warm-up for your class, but like a warm-up for you as a teacher, where it's like, okay, I'm getting ready to teach. I'm going to teach the thing I know really, really well, right? I know it backwards and forwards, so that, you know, 10, 15 minutes in class, you feel like, okay, I'm ready for whatever's next. So it's an opportunity for you to have something really solid that you feel really comfortable with. And then for Commander-in-Chief, you're going to teach this, right? You're going to teach this to us. You're going to have the weekend to work on it. Someone's going to teach Tuesday, someone's going to teach Wednesday, and then someone's going to teach the following Tuesday. So I usually just ask for a volunteer, whoever's like excited to teach first. So you'll be teaching, and when you teach, you're going to give us orders, right? You're going to tell us what to do. So as you start to put together your movements, I just want to plant that seed. So come Tuesday, come Wednesday, when you're teaching, you're ready to say, okay, step the feet underneath the hips, bend the knees, start to notice the length in your spine as you reach up, so that you're ordering us, because that's how we'll start to build warmth and get in the zone, right? We're just taking orders. You're like, you don't have to be a drill sergeant, but like you're going to tell us what to do and we're going to listen. Any questions about writing your warm up and then diving into teaching it next week?
So we're doing it all from the warm up with like we're gonna teach the warm up and then going right into the class, or we're doing our warm up ourselves like what we usually do. Is that what you mean?
So you like at 7:30 my time, so 1:30 your time. You'll definitely be practicing this warm up now that you have it, right? There's like that warm up round, so you guys are all gonna like be doing this warm up yourself in your body, just getting practice. And then when we have class, I don't know exactly what time. It'll be like after the journal, before we start to do poses. I'll say, okay, who wants to teach their warm up today? And then whoever teaches, it'll probably be like 10 to 15 minutes. I'll probably cut you off at 15 minutes if it goes longer. And so you'll teach your warm-up, and we'll give you some feedback about the sequence, about the movements, about the teaching, and then we'll just go right into the poses for that day. So it'll be a great way for you to just like get used to teaching a little bit more. It'll be great for us to get to give some feedback, and it'll be great that we'll be really warm and ready for our poses. Does that answer your question, Mel? Great. So basically your assignment is to now use all the movements that you've created to create a sequence. And just a reminder, as Satyam said, you might come up with something that checks a few boxes. So you don't feel like, okay, I have to have one thing for this, one thing for this, one thing for this. It can be a little more organic. And we're not really worried about how long it is time-wise, as long as it feels like we're warm and ready for practice in 15 minutes or less. Cool. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's like you present it and maybe we'll give you an idea of like something that's missing, so you just do your best and it'll be really fun to share and just make it even better. Yay. So excellent. We are going to shift gears into meditation. Before we do that, I just want to see if there are any questions about the things that you should be working on until we see each other. Because I know I'll see you this afternoon at yoga, but we won't really talk about logistical stuff. So are you guys good with all the things that you're working on until next Tuesday? Great. So Satyam's going to come in just a couple minutes. So feel free if you need to do anything to feel comfortable for meditation, or if you want to light some incense or set the mood for yourself. Have a great meditation, and I look forward to practicing yoga with you later.
All right, sound check. Thank you. All right. And then one more sound check, just because you're both here. I'm gonna play the drum real quick and just sort of hear how this sounds. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om. And then let me know if this sounds better or worse. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Or the same. So was the second way better, worse, or the same? Same. Pretty much the same, Carol? Same. Okay. All right, cool. All right, good to know. Thank you. Turn. Okay. That makes my life a little simpler then. All right. So as you can tell, we're going to do mantra. And we will be doing a little extra emphasis with the heart. But it's important to sort of work our way there gradually. Before we start, any questions about, our mantra practice that we've been doing together? Anything you're wondering about, or any challenges you've been facing? Just curious. Okay, pretty straightforward, just effort over time, huh? All right, cool. So everybody should be settled in. We're going to go for about 25 total minutes. Hopefully you can square away the space to have to really focus on your practice. So before we start our out loud mantra practice, just connecting with the length of your breath. It's something that, everybody tends to start with, so you almost start to overlook it as a cue. But connecting with your breath and with the length of your breath is a great way to find the present. And I say find it because the present isn't always easy to find. It's like a moving target. Just like your breath is a moving target. And the present can be sometimes it's easy to overlook. It can be a little bit, I wouldn't say boring, but the idea is like, it's not always grabbing your attention. And so therefore, we look elsewhere. So just like the breath, if you were to try to focus on the breath as you are right now, it's always there. You can focus on it. But you sort of got to coax your mind into actually doing it. It doesn't happen automatically. And then as you're able to hold your focus on the breath, you can feel what we call the present. You can feel it. You can sense it. You know what it means in that moment. And actually feeling like you are connecting with the present, like you're actually holding yourself, holding your mind and your body in the present, is a huge accomplishment that is easily overlooked. Your mind will become distracted by the smallest thing. You got to pull it back. as you're repeating your mantra out loud, you're not just saying the words out loud. Like that's just the tip of the iceberg. You're saying the mantra Om Namah Shivaya almost as an anchor to the present. Om Namah Shivaya. You're not just saying it, you're hearing it and you're feeling it. Every time you say it, you could be using that mantra to experience, to hold yourself in the present. It's not automatic. You gotta actually participate. But you will feel when you're doing it, and you'll notice when you're not. You can feel the difference. And so we'll start with some out loud mantra. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Namah Shivaya, Om 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 Namah Shivaya. a transition to repeating that mantra silently with each breath now. And repeat it clearly though. Really hear it internally. Hear yourself saying this mantra with every breath in, with every breath out, just like you did out loud. Staying present is work. Being distracted is easy. Repeating this mantra with each breath takes effort. You are literally changing your internal structure each time you consciously choose to repeat the mantra instead of that other patterned thought. And swallow, loosening up the throat a little bit, and then try to feel the breath flow a little bit deeper than normal, just stretching itself towards the heart. And just feel that little lift in the heart as you breathe in, and then as you exhale, let your chest soften. Just try to feel that very gentle movement in the chest with each breath. And we're just going to try and repeat this mantra from the heart area. Just let your awareness sink down towards the heart like a turtle drawing its head into its shell. So let your awareness sink down little by little. just imagine with that little stretch you feel at the heart with each breath, that little physical sensation that accompanies the breath. With that sensation, repeat your mantra from the heart. Let yourself intone an om sound a couple of times. That humming, like literally humming the om sound, and try to feel that vibration in the heart. And where you feel that vibration, that's where you repeat your mantra from, silently with your breath. You don't have to push the thoughts away. You don't have to do anything with them. You just have to keep finding the heart. And when you find it, with a breath or with your awareness, you try to hold that space with your mantra, with your breath, with your awareness. You will naturally be distracted. And that's when you find it again. When your mind feels confused, it's a sign that you're making progress, that you're actually encountering something new, something real. Redirect. Find the heart. Find your mantra. Keep it simple. Pour all your energy in that one simple direction. Let it work for you. For the last minute of class, you can try a little game with your mantra. With each breath, for example, the next inhale you take, you can silently repeat Om Namah Shivaya, and you can say the number 10. And as you exhale, you can say silently Om Namah Shivaya 9. And then your next inhale, Om Namah Shivaya 8. And so you can silently count down with each breath till you get all the way to 0. See if you can make it without losing focus. Silently counting as you breathe. And when you do reach 0, then you just say Om Namah Shivaya with each breath. Just like we were before, except you'll feel more focused. There is a finish line in meditation. It's not forever. Treat each 30-minute sit like a little start to finish event where you really give it everything you've got. And when that 30 minutes is done and the bell rings, then you're left with what you put into it. So maybe that little countdown exercise could be a fun way for you to work with your practice until we practice together again, especially if you find the mind wandering a lot. Namaste. Thanks, everyone. Hard to believe it's been 2 days. I know I haven't been here for all of those days, so it seems really quick for me. But nonetheless, hope you all have a great week. I'll hang around as usual for questions, but thanks for making it so fun. And I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.